Okay, this is the browse products video. This is part 5, I think. We're going to add the facility to buy items where we've got stock. So if we look at what I've got at a minute, outruns 4 items, R-Tab 2, none in final fight, so we won't allow anyone to buy that, or A, etc. Okay, now in order for this to be possible, we've got our item table with our item ID. Now we've got a purchase table, so a customer purchases something, okay, so that's got a purchase ID which we'll have to generate, and then we've got a link table called purchase DL which links up the IDs of the items there you go, item ID, with a particular purchase. So if we want to know what the user is, we have to look at purchase for that. It's also got a key field, purchase detail, which is actually an auto number. Okay, because with this system that I've got here, you can have multiples of the same items. Okay, so I will not have a unique pairing when I add item ID and purchase ID together, because I've got 2 of the same thing. Okay, so I've got a unique identifier. That's important when we want to delete things. Okay, if your system is you can only buy 1 of each item, then you don't need this. But I'm building that. So if we just quickly look at the database in Access, just load it up. Okay, there it is. So my purchase detail in design view, it's got the ID and the item number to do the links, and then I've just made a key with an auto. I'm never going to create that myself. I'm not bothered about it. I'm not going to display it. I'm only going to use it when I try and delete things from an order. Okay, so you can whack one of those into your link table for your purchases. Okay then, what we're going to do, we're going to, in our display products subroutine for our browse screen, we're going to add a buy button. Okay, now for my example, because I've got amounts, so I'm showing you a fuller example, you don't have to have this, I'm only going to show the buy button if there is stock. Okay, so otherwise I'll try and sell things that I don't have, and I'm only going to show this button as well to users that are logged in. Okay, so what I'm going to do first is I'm going to check to see if I've got a user. Now I'm going to display this immediately after the description of the product. Okay, so before all my comment box stuff, I'm going to put it there. So I'm going to say storage user ID is not equal to -1, and I'm going to ask my database if the amount field is greater than 0. Okay, so that's my conditions. You don't have to do that. You could just check that you've got a user logged in. It won't work if you haven't got a user logged in, because you won't have to link the purchase to. Okay, so what we can do is create a label. I'm just going to call it buy equals a new label, and all I'm going to do is make a hyperlink. So I'm going to say buy.text equals, right, so I'm going to put a href equals, right, so I'm going to say $A equals buy, so I'm setting an action query string item, and then I'm going to have I equals, and then I'm going to put the product number, so the unique number for the item. Okay. Right, just have a look. Okay, I'm also going to put at the end of this a break tag to force everything onto the next line. Right, I've got a bit of a cock up there, I didn't say plus. Okay, so that creates a hyperlink. Let me just in a comment show you what that hyperlink looks like. So it's going to be a href equals question mark a equals by and I equals, and let's say it's item number 6. So that's the hyperlink. That's the text that's displayed. And that ends the hyperlink. Okay, that's what's going to be created for me. So I'll put it in single quotes because I'm using double quotes to mark my strings, and it just keeps everything nice and simple. Okay, and I'm just going to make sure I add that to my item div. So for this item it gets added, so control.add by. Okay, so let's just run that just to make sure that appears. So I'm logging in. It's only going to work if I log in, so I'm going to log in as Daz. Oops. Password Daz. Browse my products, and I've got the buy item link now. Okay, when you hover over it, you can see it says A equals buy, I equals 6. Next one, A equals buy, I equals 5, and so on. Okay, so that bit works. The next thing we need to do is when the page is loaded, let's go back to browse. We need to pick up this query string to see if we've got any actions to take on board. So that's going to be in our page load event, and we're going to do it before we show any of the stuff. So before all this code, we're going to do a switch. Alright, now as added protection, we're only going to bother to do this if there's a user logged in. So storage.userid is not equal to -1. So I only even bother looking at this if that's true. So we're going to say switch, and then we're going to request the query string variable a, and then we're going to do our case for this. So we're going to say case by, and what we're going to do is add item to order. So we're going to create a subroutine that adds a particular item, and we'll take the item's number from the query string variable I, because that's what we built. Okay, so if we find that A equals by, then we can run the subroutine that we're going to create. Let's just double check that to make sure that's what we did. We said A equals by, I equals the item ID. Okay, so it should pick up the item ID for us. Alright, so we're going to create that. So generate method stub, go to it, and then we'll start working on that code. Okay. Right then. Delete that. Let's change the name of this parameter to item ID to make it a little bit more meaningful. Right, what we're going to need to do, we're going to need to create a basket for the user. Okay, well basically what that means is we need to create a record in purchase so that we can get an ID. Once we've got that ID, we need to store it so that this user's session carries on and they can keep adding items to that basket. Okay, so we need to create storage space for this. So, and we can test to make sure we've got a current order. So I'm going to call it current order ID. If that equals -1, then what I'm going to do is create a new order. So I'm going to create a new one if I need to. Alright, now neither of these things exist, so I haven't got this yet. So I'm going to go to definition, well I'm going to generate it as a property, current order ID, and I'm going to generate create new order as a method stub. Okay, and I'll fill that in a minute. So let's go and sort out current order ID. Right, it's going to be a number, so if you've got a number one already, which we have in the user ID, we can steal the code for that. So let's just copy all the code for user ID. So everything in between the opening and closing brace I'm copying, and I'm just going to paste it here. Okay, so if I just paste it there, it'll reformat it. Now what I must do is change this session variable. So that was one for my user ID. This one's going to be for my, I'm going to call it basket internally, basket ID, and I must use that same name there. Okay, so that's a number one. So that gets my gets or sets current order ID number. Okay, make sure you change that, otherwise you're going to overwrite your user ID data, and that will be a disaster. Okay, but the structure is the same. We return a number, or if it doesn't exist, we return -1, or we set the number that we're given. Okay, so let's go back to browse. Right, let's create our new order code. Now this is going to be no different to the thing when we've created a new user or we've created a new product. Okay, so we're going to have a new purchase ID. That was my key field for purchase, and I'm going to create next purchase ID in my data helper. So let's go and generate that thing. Again, this is going to be the exact same code that we've used. Oops, can't navigate to it, you've got to create it. So I need to generate a property for that. Go to it. Right, if I look for my next user ID one, so I'll scroll up. Here's my next user ID one. I'm going to nick that code. Okay, because it's going to be practically the same, and I just need to change the values, and I'm going to paste it in here. Okay, so I've got string select top one, but I want purchase ID. Oops, and this is from my table purchase. Order by purchase ID descending. Return purchase ID. Otherwise, return 1 if it's the first one that we've ever created. Okay, so select the first purchase ID from purchase, order by purchase ID descending. So I'll always get the biggest, and then I add 1 to that number, or I return 1. Okay, so that's code that we've had before. Right, let's go back to browse. So that creates a new order for us, an ID. Let's do the rest of the code to create the new one. And obviously yours might not be identical to this, so you need to be careful. Don't follow me literally. So I'm going to create a new purchase, and I'm going to give it the purchase ID, because I'm going to set that, the user ID, and I've got a boolean called open, which is a keyword in SQL. Okay, so I'll put it in square brackets, and what open does, it says if an order's been finished. Okay, which I might set at a later date. I'm not using it at the moment. I've also got a date of purchase, but I've got that set with a default value, so I don't need to set that. Okay, so I'm only using these 3 parameters. So question mark, question mark, come on, question mark. Okay, do my parameter collection. So parameter collection PC equals new parameter collection, just like we've done a million times. Add my parameters in the right order. So new parameter. So my first parameter is going to be my new purchase ID, which is a type code int32, and that is go away, new purchase ID, but I need to remember to turn it into a string because it wants everything as text. Okay, so that does my purchase ID one. And then I want the user ID, so I'm going to pick that up directly from my storage. New parameter, type code. Again, it's going to be an int32. This is going to make a link back to the user, and so that's going to come from storage dot user ID, but I need to convert it to a string, so I use toString. And then the last one is this open thing. So if you haven't got anything like this, obviously don't add it. because it's going to break. I'm only showing you an example, remember. I'm not showing you how to do it for your system. This is just the basic functions. So that's a Boolean. And I'm going to set that to true to say that it's open. Okay. Then I'm going to, on the next line, data, execute my insert statement with that SQL and those parameters. Right. What I should now do is say that, right, I've got a basket, so I'm going to set my storage. So my current order ID is actually my new purchase ID. Okay, so that should have created my new order. So when I tried to add an item, I check to see if I've got an order in process. If I have, fine. If I haven't, create a new one. So let's now add the item that we purchased to our order. So we want to make now a record in purchase detailed using the purchase ID and the user and the items ID. Okay, so remember, I've only got two things that I need to worry about. Purchase detail ID was an auto number, which I'm not going to refer to. So all I've got to do is create a query SQL equals, it's another insert because we're adding a record. So this is going in purchase detail for me, and I'm going to put in the purchase ID and the item ID, leaving a space at the end, otherwise I'll get issues. And two parameters, so select question mark. Okay, I'm going to create a parameter collection. So parameter collection PC equals new parameter collection. PC.add new parameter. So my first parameter was my purchase ID. Now that comes from my storage this time. That's a that's a type code int32, and that comes from storage dot current order ID, but I need to turn it into a string, so I've got to do toString. Okay, the other parameter is the item, so I'm going to add the item, new parameter, question mark is its, oh dear, question mark is its name, type code, and again the type code for this is going to be an integer, so that's int32, and it's going to come from item ID, which is already a string because it came from a query variable. Okay, so it's that parameter I gave at the start of this there. Okay. Right, all I've got to do then is ask my data helper to do my insert query with that SQL and those parameters. Okay, what I should do is then redisplay the page. So if I say browse.aspx, okay, and then what I can do is in a moment I can check, I'll do it in the next video. I can check to see if there's any basket items and show them and set them up so we can delete them and stuff. Okay, right, the other thing I've got to do is I need to change my stock level for my item. So for this item ID I need to now drop the number of items by 1. Okay, now I can do this, there's loads of different ways. It's an update query. So what I'm going to do to make it easy for me is I'm just going to set up a little helper. Well, no, I'll do it here. I'm going to say, right, SQL equals update. So I'm going to create a new query. I've already got a string called SQL, so I'm just copying it. Now my thing's called item, so I've got to put that in square brackets. So I'm going to do update set, leave a space after set. Right, and on the next line I'm going to change the value of amount. So I'm going to say amount equals amount minus 1. Okay, so I'm saying whatever amount currently is, take one off it. So I'm actually getting the database to do the work here. Okay, but I must make sure that, oops, that I only do it if I left it with no where clause, it'd do it for every single item. So I'd have got rid of one off everything. So I just need to say for the particular item I want to do. So I'm going to create a parameter collection. So instead of me typing it, I'm just going to copy that from there, and it's the item ID one I want, so I'm going to copy that one. Okay, right, PC already exists, so I don't need to redefine it, I just need to create a new one. Okay, so I say PC is a new one now with this parameter. Okay, and all I should need now to do is to run my update helper. So data.execute update SQL PC. Okay, so that should reduce the stock items by 1, and we can see that working in a sec. So let's have a quick review because time's getting tight now. We created in our display product a hyperlink that said A equals by, and then used the item ID to set another query string variable I. When we load the page up, we check to see if we've got anything in the query string variable A. If we've got by, we run item to order. We look in our storage that we have to set up to hold the current purchase ID number, which I call current order in here, doesn't matter. If we haven't got one, we create a new one. Let's quickly go to that, which just creates a new record in purchase ID and puts the user ID in for us, generates a new purchase ID just like in all the other ones. Once we've got a ordering process, all we do is we add a record to purchase detail, which is our link table, which has got the purchase ID for the open order and the item we want to add to it. Okay, and then I've got another little bit of code that adjusts the stock level of the item I've just bought. Okay, so then we redirect back to the browse page. Right, let's go to default and run this and just check this works. So I'll pick an item that's got some products and we should see the product number going down. So let me log in as Dave Bloke, browse products. Right, I've got on outrun stock 4. So if I click on by item, and this hopefully all works. Oh, see, the stock level's gone down to 3. Let me just keep going. Buy. Stock level 0 doesn't show buy anymore. Okay, let's just make sure that they've gone in. So if we look at the database and we look at the purchase, so retrieve the data. So order 8, 4th of the 3rd 2012. Let's have a look at purchase detail. Purchase detail, order 8, I bought the same product, product 6, 4 times. Let's just look at item just to prove 6 was outrun. Okay, right, I'll stop the video there before I run out of time. So the next video is going to show you how to show the items in the basket.